Hello, my name is Amanda Diaz, and I am faculty at Cal State Fullerton in the College of Education in the Literacy and Reading Education Department. And so this webinar, Miss to Doctor, going from the classroom teaching to the professorship, is really talking about how I went from being a classroom teacher to being a professor, and the moves I made along the way and the insights, the things I've learned to share with you if that is something that you're also considering. So, something that I want to note is that I have a PhD, so a Doctor of Philosophy, and then there's also an EDD, which is a Doctorate of Education. Lots of folks you can get a PhD in lots of different things. So you can get a PhD in mathematics or in biomedical engineering. You can get a PhD in history or in literature. You can also get one in education. A doctorate of education, you can only get in education. So there is a little bit of difference there that EDDs are specific to the field of education. Typically, when somebody has a PhD, their PhD programs are often more focused on research and scholarship, whereas EDD programs are often more focused on educational policies and leadership. So, there are people who have EDDs and they go on to become educational researchers and work as professors. And there are people with with PhDs who then work for policy. They work for governments or districts and things like that. So you're not limited to only one or the other kind of outcomes, like if you want to work in policy, but that's typically where they are. And then often, if you're getting an EDD, you're less likely to be like mentorship in research in terms of like publication. So you're still doing research, it's just for policy outcomes. So it can look a little bit different. So there are folks who have both, but mine background is a PhD. And so that's what I'll be talking about. That's what my experience is on. Some of this may transfer over to EDD, but some of it may not because it's just a little bit of a different program and some of the requirements may be different. So in this talk, I want to talk a little bit about me, just general my background to help you kind of like understand where I was when I was coming into these decisions and the information that I had and didn't have. My decision to enter graduate school at all, so getting a master's degree. I'll talk a little bit about what that was like, and then just getting a doctorate. So applying to a doctorate program, getting funded in a doctorate program. Then I'll talk a little bit about getting a job and then what it means to be a professor and the kind of work I do as a professor. So a little bit about me is that I am from Central Texas, from Austin. I was raised by a single mother in a low-income family with five children. I was an average student. I, excelled in the things I was interested in, which was like English, reading, writing, journalism, things like that. But overall, I was a pretty average student. I did not really know anything about college, about academia, the things that we kind of call the hidden curriculum. And so sometimes when I meet folks and they find out I'm a professor, they'll be like, oh, were your parents professors, things like that. And my mother was a waitress. So, no, this was just not an expectation that I would become a professor or even necessarily go to college. So I kind of came into this cold. I didn't have folks in my family that had done this that could kind of advise me. So I was a first generation college student. I went to the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I taught middle school English and English language arts. So this is me when I was a middle school teacher and then later became a high school teacher. So, I finished school, I got my teaching certification, and that was really what I thought I would do until I retired was to be a classroom teacher in middle and high school. But then when I was teaching high school, I really started thinking more about getting my master's. I had done a lot of professional development that was offered through my school district and through the state where the way that Texas was set up. But I just really thought that I needed more tools to be the best teacher that I could be to better serve my students. I was teaching ninth grade English and at a public high school that was very tracked. They didn't call it tracked, but there was average or regular general academic ninth grade English, pre-AP, because you can't be AP in ninth grade. Then they had something that was called end of course, so which meant that students who in Texas, if you have to pass the state test in eighth grade to be promoted to high school, and if you don't pass it, you can have a grade placement committee and you're promoted or placed. Sorry, not promoted. You're placed in high school. So they have a different class which is focused on state test readiness, and then there was another class I taught that was class that I co-taught with a special education teacher where not all of the students, but about a third of the students to a half of the students in these courses had IEPs or 504 programs where they just needed more accommodations to be successful in class. And so these are kind of like five different kind of tracks, classes that I was teaching. And I didn't have the language for it then, but the system wasn't sitting right with me. And I thought, well, I just needed to have more skills and knowledge so that I could be a better teacher. And so I decided to get my master's. This was a huge choice for me. Um, a really hard and big decision. And um, at the time, I was a caregiver for my mother. She had moved in with me. She was very ill, and I was working full time, and my husband was a full-time student. And I was really worried about whether I would be able to meet all of these demands in my life. So my choice, I decided, I was going to do it. I thought I would get my master's and just stay a teacher again until, retirement, that was going to be my career path. Um, and I paid for my master's program mainly out of pocket. I got some small scholarships, but I really didn't want to take out any loans. I already had student loans from my undergraduate, and so I didn't want to add to that. Um, and this photo is from my first day as a full-time teacher and a full-time student. I've just gotten back from class. You can see it's dark outside because this was on-campus classes 2 nights a week for 3 hours. So 5 to 8 o'clock, I would so teach a full day and then go to the university for my full day of classes. Here, this is very much a forced smile because my mother had actually passed away 2 weeks before my master's program started. And so that demand of those caregiving responsibilities was no longer there. But I was still very much grieving through being a master's student. And I share this just because life keeps happening, man. It doesn't matter that you're going through this big thing of grieving. You still have to show up and do these things. Or it doesn't matter that you're doing this big thing of being a graduate student because your life keeps going on. So that can be really tricky. And for me, that was really hard. And it was also really hard to be a full-time teacher. I really felt like I was having to pick between being a good student and being the best teacher that I could be. And it was a really tricky balance. So, about halfway through my master's program, I decided that I did want to pursue a PhD. I started to realize the issue wasn't me as a teacher, I was having an issue with these systems of having, 5 tracks of students and um, how we're thinking about what students should and shouldn't be able to do, and that decided that I would want to do some educational research and spend some more time answering some of the questions I had. And so my husband was finishing school, and we decided that yes, I would pursue a PhD once he finished. So it worked out that he finished his school at the same time I finished my master's program, but that I would only get a PhD if I could do it full time. I didn't want to have to be in that position of picking between being a good teacher and a good student anymore. That if I was going to get this PhD, I was going to do it full time. And so because I was going to do it full time, I didn't have my caregiving responsibilities anymore. It was really opened up where I could go. I didn't need to stay in Texas. I didn't need to stay local. I could really kind of go anywhere. And so started to look nationally at different programs that I was interested in. So when I was looking at these different programs, I was really just searching like literacy education programs. I talked to my advisor and different professors in my program. I was thinking about the work that I was reading and who was doing work that was interesting and looking at those programs. But I was also just like Googling literacy education programs. A lot of them are called like literacy, language, and culture, or something kind of similar to that. So looking at different schools of education and what programs that they offered. And so the things that I was really considering was do the program align with my values and my goals? So are they thinking about education, not exactly the way that I think about it because I was still learning, but in similar ways? Is there some orientation towards equity and justice and looking, at literacy from equitable outcomes? Those are something I was really interested in and still am. Then I was looking at the faculty. So just faculty there do work that I'm interested in. And when I say faculty, I don't mean one member. Are there a handful, two, three, four, five people, five is kind of that are doing the work that I'm interested in or similarly interested in, even if it's not exact, because what you're interested in will change. But, my background is in middle and high school. I didn't want to be at a program where everyone was focused on elementary. That wasn't a good fit for me. So thinking about that. And are there mentorship opportunities? So Gloria Latson Billings is emeritus faculty, so she's retired from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. But when she was working there, she was in high demand. I've heard her give talks before where she talks about, everyone wanted to be in her class. She had lots of students knocking at her door. You don't want to go somewhere only because of one faculty member, especially if it's Gloria Latson Billings, because she doesn't need to mentor a lot of students. She's got a full plate already. And if there's somebody who's a little bit older, they may be near retirement. They may not be even taking on new students. So that's something to think about. You don't want to go somewhere because they have one rock star person. You want to go somewhere where there are going to be multiple people who can mentor you because mentorship typically comes from lots of people. Yes, you'll have one advisor, but ideally you'll be able to work with lots of different faculty and learn lots of different things from different folks. So that's something to think about as well. Is are you going to be able to get mentored? And that often means going to a place where they have both um, tenure track faculty who have made tenure and tenure track faculty who are working towards tenure. We call them junior faculty because they're going to have a good mix of opportunities available. Then you want to think about funding. Is this a place that you can get funded and can you afford to live in the city with the funding that you get? You may not know what kind of funding is available until after you apply and you're accepted, but that's definitely something to think about. If it's a really expensive city and it's going to cost a lot to live there, is there something to help students with housing? If the tuition is out of state, like for me, there's out of state tuition. You I needed a tuition waiver. I needed to not pay any tuition because I couldn't afford to do this otherwise. And so that's something to think about. But those funding packages may not be clear until after you've been accepted into the program. And then location. And that's on here twice because I had two kind of considerations for location. Is one, could my husband get a job in the city they were moving to that was in his field, right? He was just finishing school. So could he get a job that would be able to support our household in this city? And then is there a place that my husband and I wanted to live? Is the area culturally, ethnically, racially diverse? Did the politics of the area match my values? And are there things there that we wanted to do? Is it a place that we want to live? So, yes, you're going for a school, but you still have to live there and bring your life there. And so, for me, that was important to think about. Different folks will have different criteria for this. Some people think I can live anywhere for a short period of time. I just really want a quality educational experience. But for me, I really wanted both. I wanted to be able to be happy about the place that I was living, especially if I was able to, choose. I was born and raised in Texas. I moved from Austin to San Antonio because of school and kind of stayed there, but it didn't really feel like, I got to pick all of, where I was moving to. So I wanted to make sure if I was leaving my family, my friends, and my whole life behind, that it was at least for a place that would be enjoyable to live. So something to think about is you don't know what kind of job you're going to get after this. And I will say that most people who get a PhD do not get a job as tenure track professors. They don't get jobs in academia. That is not the norm. Most people get jobs working for companies, nonprofits. They say classroom teachers, they work for the district, different things like that. But so becoming a professor is kind of, we think of it as the thing that you do if you get a PhD, but it really is the alternative route because there are more graduates than jobs available. So that's something to think about. But if you are set that you want to be a professor, you don't get to pick the school necessarily that's hiring and where you're going to work, but something to think about is if you have a dream school that you want to work for or a place that you want to be, don't get your PhD from them because graduate programs or like these faculty jobs, they don't hire their graduates. So if you graduate from Cal State Fullerton with your PhD, though they don't offer one in literacy ed, but if you did, they're not going to hire you to be faculty in that same program. Um, it's just not the norm. Now, some universities do this after their graduates leave. So, for example, at the University of Illinois, Chicago, they have Goldie Muhammad on staff. She's faculty there. She graduated from UIC from that university, but then she left. She went to Georgia and had worked as faculty there, and then came back. That is not the norm. UIC does this they've done it a few times, but most universities don't do that unless you're gone for a really long time, longer than Dr. Muhammad was. So that's something to keep in mind, is that you're not going to graduate from the institution and then get a faculty job at that same institution. Also, some universities will only hire universities from or students from particular universities. So UT Austin, they're a really well-known school of education. They're a top public school for their College of Ed. They will only hire people who have graduated from other top schools. They actually have a list, or who have worked at those other schools. Now, faculty have mentioned that they don't appreciate this. It kind of limits who they're getting. It's a little bit elitist and snobby, but that is the way that that institution runs, and to other ones as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But going to a top university does not guarantee that you will get a job at another top university or at any university to begin with. So, going to um, a, a more in demand school is great. You are going to get, you may get a better education there, or more mentorship opportunities, or more um, scholarship done and more publication, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get a job. So that's something to think about too, is that job security is not guaranteed. Um, as somebody who, my family does not come from this background, they kind of think, oh, you can just get a job anywhere, and you actually can't. There are fewer jobs available to you in your field once you kind of climb up in academia. So then when you're applying to the doctorate program, my first advice is to get organized. You should apply to multiple programs, is my recommendation. And so I made a spreadsheet and I really just was looking at what are the program requirements. So they're going to tell you applicants need to meet these requirements. Usually there's a GPA requirement. Sometimes they'll want you to take the GRE, but not always. Sometimes it's optional to submit that if you're already having to take it because one of the places you're applying to requires it, you might as well submit it everywhere. They're all going to require letters of recommendation. Usually it's 3 letters. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4, but it's usually 3 letters of recommendations. These are the letters from faculty in your master's program. You should approach this faculty very far in advance with a personalized request where you are asking them exactly what you want. You're saying, I'm applying to doctoral programs. I am hoping you can write me a letter. I would like you to highlight these types of things about me. Um, but make sure you're really personalizing your request to them and you're giving them a lot of notice. And then a statement of purpose. So your statement of purpose is for each university is going to ask you to include this. And this really counts for a lot. This is really where you are personally selling yourself as a good student for their program. You can write like one that you're going to then as like a template, but you need to then tailor it for each university that you're applying for. So, what are the university goals? What are their faculty doing? What are they looking for? Make sure your letter really speaks to that at an institution by institution basis. If you have one letter that you're writing for University One and you send it to all of the universities, it's going to come through, and it's going to weaken your application. And your statement of purpose should really be like pushing you over the edge and highlighting you in the best ways possible. Now, some folks decide to get their PhD because they want to work for their district, or they want to stay classroom teachers. They want to work for a nonprofit, or maybe they don't even quite know what they want to do, but they want this PhD. All that is fine. But in your statement of purpose, PhDs, uh, they're typically more research focused. So you want to sell yourself here as somebody who is interested in doing educational research. So in your statement of purpose, what kind of research are you interested in? What do you want to further explore? Don't talk about how you want to stay a classroom teacher forever. That's a great and important thing. But why do you need a PhD to do that? So, thinking about what is the PhD going to do for you, and how are you going to help move the field forward with this PhD? Now, you're not married to your statement of purpose. Things will change, but you just want to make sure that you're selling yourself in the best way possible here. And then before you start submitting that, have your academic advisor or professor who knows you read it and provide some feedback, just to make sure you're not making any faux pas in your language, to make sure that you're really like speaking the academic language that they're looking for. And then you'll also usually will submit your resume with your application, make sure it's polished, that, all of the things that you get told about making a quality resume, that applies here as well. And so when you're getting organized in that spreadsheet, here's kind of what my top headers looked like. So for mine, I included the name of the university and then the name of the program, and I hyperlinked the website to the program there. I had my application deadline, the link to the application portal. So you'll have to apply online, the link to that portal. And I also put in my username and password for that link, the GPA that they required, if they required a GRE, what was my score, and then I would know whether it had been sent to them, just to confirm, because when you take the test, you can, send it off to different universities. And then my letters of recommendation. So I put the names of the faculty who agreed to write a letter, and then notes whether they had submitted it or not. When you're asking faculty to write you a letter, give them lots and lots of advance notice to write it. And then, if you're having them write you one letter, you might as well have them write you three, because after they've written the one letter, they can tweak it a little bit more to tailor it to whichever place you're asking for. I would say have one faculty who could probably write three, maybe four if you know them really well letters. Then after that, you should tap somebody else, right? You don't want one faculty though writing like 10 letters for you. That's too much to ask of them to do. But you could have them write two or three letters for you, and that would be fine. Um, you'll want to put a note on whether it's been submitted, and then send a gentle reminder 2 weeks before the deadline. Faculty letters of recommendation, they are part of your entire application, and they are due when your entire application is due. So if your faculty member does not submit the letter on time, your application is not on time. So you do want to follow up with that gentle reminder, but after it's been submitted, usually you'll get an email notification that lets you know that it's been submitted. And faculty typically, if they've agreed to write it, they're going to write it. And some of them will just do it at the last minute, and that can be anxiety provoking, but you also don't want to email them like every hour. So there's a balance between just a gentle reminder and then being like overbearing, filling their inbox with reminders. You want to be on the more gentler side. And then if you're feeling nervous that the faculty may not be able to write your letter on time, then you need to have somebody else lined up. And then your statement of purpose. So I would have my notes for like how I was tailoring it, whether my draft was complete or not. And I use Google Docs, so I would like link it to the Google Doc. And then any notes on like, add about their mission statement or about a particular faculty member, anything I needed to know, I had there. And then I had a separate column where I was listing faculty that I was interested in working with. So, their name, I would put usually in parentheses the kind of work that they did, and then a link to their bio as well. Um, Maybe their email address or some other notes, but it's really just for myself. And then another column where any other requirements or notes, things that I needed to know or have done for the application. And then the application fee, how much was the fee, had I paid it or not? And then the status, whether it was submitted or not yet submitted, and then decision. I would have like pending, accepted, or if I was denied, I would have those notes in there. And then you just kind of, after you have that done, you set out, you wait, you'll start to then get in your notices, your acceptances or denials. Hopefully, though, you have lots of acceptances and you have some choices on to where you're going to go. After you start getting accepted, I have kind of three pieces of advice. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I learned the hard way. It's just this first one is to wait to officially accept your admission. You may get the acceptance from the school that you've wanted to go to, and you're so excited and you want to accept it right away and tell everyone, I got it, I'm set, I'm good, I'm good. Don't do that. And first, wait until you've heard from everyone, decide where you want to go, and then just wait a little bit more, wait a few more days, but don't pass your acceptance deadline. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about why that is. I had applied to the University of Madison, Wisconsin. I'm sorry, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, not because of Gloria Letts and Billings, but it's a really great school. Their College of Ed is really highly rated, and there was a faculty member that I was really excited to work with. And so when I got my acceptance, that faculty member was assigned to be my advisor. And I got a pretty generous funding package. And I thought, oh, holy cow, this is amazing. I'm set. The letter came on my birthday, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is meant to be. I'm doing it. So I accepted, and I told some other universities, no, thank you. And I had some funding from other universities, and I thought, well, I better tell them no so they could give it to the next person. And I thought I was doing the thing that you're supposed to do, sharing is caring. Somebody else can get this funding who's going to go to that university. But then I got a call from the person that would be my advisor that was letting me know they were actually leaving the university. They hadn't announced this yet, but they're from a different part of the country. They wanted to get back to where they were from, be closer to some of their family. And they had another position lined up. So when I spoke with her, she told me, I could stay at Madison. I would still have the funding. I still had a spot. I would get a different advisor. I could follow her to this other university, but it was in a place I didn't want to live. But I could go there and she would get me funding and I could work with her. Or I could go to one of the other universities that I'd been accepted to. And in having the conversation with her, she kind of shared that at the time there weren't a lot of faculty members left in Madison that were doing the kind of things that I was interested in. And she's the one that really gave me some more solid advice about mentorship and finding places where there are mentors for me. And so that really made me think, well, maybe I don't want to go to Madison. And then I was also thinking, well, Madison's a great school and it's a great university, but it doesn't have the ethnic and cultural diversity that I was looking for. So, it did make me think about that. And I decided, well, I want to go actually to the University of Illinois, Chicago. They had offered me a spot, they had offered me a generous funding package, but I had said, no, thank you. So then I had to go back and say, actually, can I have it? And they said, well, you can have the spot, but we've actually given that money to someone else. So you don't have funding. Now I'll tell you a bit about what I did. But learn from my mistakes. Don't do that. Sit and wait a little bit. Something else, I don't really know how you would navigate this next thing, but sometimes they'll find out that you have funding from somewhere else and a school might offer you more money. So I also had gotten into the University of Texas at Austin and was offered some funding, but not as generous of a package. And I was also excited to leave Texas, so I wasn't super interested in pursuing that. But they knew I had multiple offers, so they did increase the funding opportunity for me. I still ended up not taking it, but that's also something to think about is that you could get more funding along the way. You just kind of have to wait. That's not the route that I went, so I can't tell you about how to play those cards, but that is something that can happen for some folks. So next thing you want to do is you want to talk to faculty and current students. So I did this. I talked to faculty and students at the universities I just mentioned, as well as some other ones. This is totally normal. Especially if you're thinking about moving, they might put you in connection with another student who's made a similar move, or if you're interested in a particular type of research, they can put you in with another student who does similar kind of work, or if you've got a kind of funding package. They might put you with a student who has another funding package because often those packages require you to do like networking kind of events and some type of mentorship. And you can talk to lots of different students. You don't just have to talk to one. So talk to different students and then also talk to faculty. So the person who's been assigned to be your advisor, they're going to want to talk to you either on the phone or through Zoom. But you can say, I'm also really interested in the work of Dr. So and so, and they can connect you as well to talk to them. So that can kind of just help you get a better sense of a good fit for you. And then, if possible, I would visit the campus. Some universities have visiting days for newly admitted doctoral students. Well, they'll kind of show you around and then they'll let you talk with students and faculty. Some of them don't, and you kind of have to arrange that on your own. Now, I was not able to visit the campus where I went. So it wasn't something I did, but if I wish that I had, just because it would have helped the transition a bit more in terms of like moving and figuring things out. So if you're able to visit the campus, I recommend that you do that. So, as I stated, I went to the University of Illinois Chicago and I got a PhD in literacy, language, and culture. That's under their curriculum and instruction department in the College of Ed. Because did not have that funding anymore, I had to kind of hustle to get a job because I really needed something that would come with a tuition waiver. So a lot of the work that graduate students do comes with a tuition waiver and a small stipend. And so in order to find something, I emailed every faculty member in my program and then also faculty in other programs who did kind of literacy related work to say, introduce myself, tell them that I was coming and, that I was looking for funding. So one faculty member who was actually leaving the university, she was moving, she said, I'm leaving, but I actually know we have a Center for Literacy through the college that works out in the city of Chicago. They have Head Start programs and adult education classes. They use graduate students. Here's the name of the director of that program. That person's name wasn't on faculty list because she was staff, so I didn't even know to think to look at that. And she put me in contact with her, and I was able to reach out to her and apply for a position and get a position that came with a tuition waiver and a small stipend. And so that was teaching adult ESL classes. Um, the way that these classes worked is that they were located at Head Start sites throughout the city. And then so the parents would drop their children off at the Head Start class and they would come upstairs and they would either take an adult GED class or an ESL class or some type of computer classes that they had available. And so I taught the adult ESL classes. So in terms of the funding, all of these came with a tuition waiver and a small stipend. But I also was just able to get lots of different types of experience and learn lots of different things in these jobs. So I taught adults for the first time and learned how that's both very similar and very different from teaching high school students. And I really learned a lot about the city and the school system. So a lot of these parents also had children that were in Chicago public schools, and then they wanted to better understand the school system so they could support their students. And so I was able to learn that with them and like just learn a lot about the city. It took me to a part of the city that I wasn't where I lived. It wasn't where campus was, so I may not have visited it before. And so that was a really important experience for me. Um, but then I got a position on campus. So I really wanted to try to get something on campus because I did find that I was missing some opportunities because I wasn't physically on the university except for my classes because I was working during the day at the adult ESL classes. And so getting to be on campus allowed me just to like be seen by my faculty so that when opportunities came up, I was able to do some ad hoc things or some research stuff and just to like be mentored more strongly. And so I found out through a listserv, like the faculty, the students all get an email sent to them when there's different job openings. And there was one for the recruitment office for the College of Education. So recruiting undergraduate students into the College of Education, and then working with other departments who wanted to recruit graduate students and helping to set up events for prospective students either in person or on Zoom. And so I got to also work with faculty in a new capacity. So this meant like sometimes finding out that faculty whose work you really admire, they were kind of rude or they were really kind and generous with their time. And I knew I could ask them if I had a question about something else. So it really allowed me to like get to know faculty in a new way that I wouldn't have if I was just a student in the classes. I also got to serve as a course instructor. So I worked as a course instructor both while I was doing the adult ESL classes and through all these other opportunities. So in different semesters, I would teach different classes in the teacher education program. This was really great because I got to teach at a university level. But I also got to start doing some research in the context of the classes I was teaching. So, thinking about how to improve my practice as a teacher educator and start collecting data related to that and doing some analysis. And this led to my first conference presentation and publication. So, it really allowed me to tie my teaching and research together, which is something I still do now. I also worked as a research assistant for a really large National Science Foundation funded project that was interdisciplinary. So it was across science, theater arts, and literacy, working in Chicago public schools. And it was a huge project. I got lots of experience collecting data, doing analysis, doing project management stuff. I had more presentations and publications, and it really just gave me this like added deeper layer in terms of how I think about literacy, learning, and interdisciplinary literacy. So it was a really great informative experience that really prepared me a lot for the work of educational researcher. And then I also, while I was still doing some of this other work, started working as an editorial assistant for Language Arts, which is a publication, a journal from the National Council for Teachers of English, and they publish peer-reviewed articles as well as they call them perspective of practices, which is accounts from teachers in the classroom. So I got to manage article submissions and sending them out to review, managing reviewers, getting their feedback in, working with the publishers and the authors to move manuscripts from submission to publication. And I just really learned a lot about the process from the other side. So I had published articles before, but now being on the other side of looking at from submission to publication to see what that process looked like, it allowed me to like when I was submitting articles to some like faux pas to watch out for, how to strengthen my submission. And then I also saw like some really senior well-known scholars have heavy revisions or sometimes poor reviews come out or sometimes like have rejections, and it just allowed me to normalize that revisions, poor reviews, and rejections are just kind of part of the field. It happens to everyone sometimes, even the most established scholars. So that as a student was a nice thing to learn it and to see and to help to like understand when that happens to me. It's really not personally, just sometimes it's not a good fit, and I can still feedback is helpful and good and moving your work forward. So then I started looking for a tenure track job my last year in the program when I was working on my dissertation. So when you're looking for a job, something to note is that you apply a year before your start date. So if somebody's going to hire somebody to start the fall of 2026, then their job call goes out the fall of 2025. So we have like new faculty who's going to start working with us. They've already been hired, even though um, the school year has like already started. They're going to start the next school year. So your those calls will start getting posted through the summer up until usually August, September. But usually the deadline to submit your application, it can vary from September to December. So different universities will have different deadlines for submitting your application. So you're gonna find out about jobs through listservs from your universities, from different professional organizations. So in literacy, I'm affiliated with a Literacy Research Association, as well as the National Council for Teachers of English, as well as the AERA, American Educational Research Association. They'll send out notifications when jobs are posted, and ILA, International Literacy Association, they have different listservs where you can get emails for job notifications. Higheredjobs.com. You can also search and sign up to get listservs for jobs that meet certain criteria. So those are the places that you're just checking all the time when you're looking for a job to see if a new job has posted. When the job posts, it's going to tell you what all of the requirements are. So they'll kind of try to sell you about why this is a great job or a great university to work. And then they'll have minimum requirements and preferred requirements. So in business and like other fields, sometimes you'll hear people say, especially to women or faculty people of color, that they don't apply because they don't meet the minimum requirements, but that you should still, that you're selling yourself short. In academia, it's different. The minimum requirements are the minimum requirements. So you have to meet those requirements. Often in like my field, it's having a PhD that's related, having so many years of classroom teaching experience, and then sometimes it's different skills or orientations. Um, so that those requirements are required. Now, the preferred, those are things, if you don't meet them, that's okay. You can still apply and be considered. So when you're looking at jobs, do you meet the qualifications for this job? And then something to think about before you even decide if you want to apply is what is the university college program? What is their mission? And does that align with the way you're thinking about education? Um, is there going to be a good fit in terms of that orientation for you? And you can, kind of do some research by like reading through what they have publicly facing. If you know people who work there or know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, kind of get the inside scoop from them. And then is this a research university or a teaching university? Does that matter for you? Do you want to be at a teaching university or research, or you just want a job? Those are things to think about. Research universities, you still have to teach, but your teaching load is lower because the amount of publications that you need to have and the research you need to do is higher. At teaching universities, you still have to do research, but the required publications you have are lower because you have to teach more classes. So those are things to consider, what it is that you want. And then what are the job requirements and what is required to make tenure? So um, are those doable that you might be able to like Google through the department personnel standards, or if there's a union, you can see some of them. Sometimes it's posted in the job application. And then if you get to an interview, you can always ask, how do you support junior faculty in making tenure? And they should have an answer ready for you. They should say, we do this, this, and this. If the answer is, oh, they kind of just figured out, that means they don't really have, or often it can mean that they don't really have systems in place to support faculty. And you want to be supported because if you don't get tenure, you get fired. So you have to get tenure to keep your job, and you don't want to get fired. So you want to be at a place that you can be supported. So once you get farther along, you can start to really ask, what does that look like? And then location. Are you willing to move? And where would you be willing to move to? So I moved for my doctorate program, knowing I would probably move for a job. So I was willing to move, but I wasn't willing to move everywhere. So there were certainly jobs that came up. There were maybe in states I was willing to go, but parts of the state that I didn't want to be. They didn't have the cultural and ethnic diversity that I was looking for. I had a child when I was in my doctoral program. So that's another thing too. Life keeps on happening when you're in your doc program. So now as a parent, I was really thinking about where did I want to raise my child and where did I not want to raise my child. So there were some places where it looked like a great job. It would be really well supported. They were maybe even really well paying, but I just didn't want to live there. So that's something to think about as well. Would you want to go back? So when you're applying for a job, you're going to really rely on your mentors at your doctoral program to help you figure out the process. That process of navigating a job is its own really big thing. Um, but for them, you're going to write a cover letter. It's almost like your statement of purpose where you're selling yourself to them. You're going to have a teaching statement, often a research statement. Some places will ask for a diversity and inclusion statement. You need letters of recommendations. It's a whole packet that you're putting together and you are tailoring it for every place that you are applying to. After you submit those, the university, the search committee, they're going to look through, they're going to get lots of applications. They're going to filter it out from these are the people that we're interested in meeting with. And then from there, they'll either have a phone call or a Zoom call. It's more Zooms now. So typically they'll Zoom with you and the search committee. That's your first interview. Sometimes they'll do a second Zoom, but typically, if after the Zoom call, they're going to narrow down their pile to then three, maybe four, maybe five, but usually three candidates that they're going to bring out to do campus interviews. So that is a full day, sometimes 2 full days where your breakfast, lunch, and dinner is all and everything in between is accounted for, where you're meeting with faculty, you're meeting with students, you're teaching a class, you're giving a presentation about your research, you're meeting with the dean, you're meeting with the associate dean. Um, Sometimes they're getting a campus tour. You're just, it's a full day or 2 days. But if you've made it that far, that's a great sign because you're a finalist for this job. And then after that, you'll get an offer. Um, some parts of an offer can be negotiated, some parts can't. And really, what that means is outside the scope of this webinar, but you'll work with your advisor to kind of talk about it, or your mentors at the university where you're at. They should be able to help you as you're navigating an acceptance and getting a job. And so then after you do that, you move, you get onboarded, you do all of those things, and you are a tenure track professor. Congratulations, you did it. Here's what your job looks like. You have teaching, you have research, you have service, and there's some like miscellaneous stuff that usually can kind of fall into one of these buckets. So teaching, you're teaching undergraduate, graduate courses. Sometimes you get to have a strong say so in what those courses are. Sometimes you're hired because they need someone to teach a particular type of course, and that's the course you're going to teach. And sometimes it changes every semester. So it really kind of depends on your department and what the needs are. If you're at a teaching university, you're going to be doing a lot more teaching than research. If you're at a research university, you're going to be doing more research than teaching. Typically, in all these places, your first year or two, sometimes three, you have a reduced teaching load to help you as you're getting onboarded, and then your teaching load will increase. Research includes conducting educational research, collecting, analyzing data, and then presenting at conferences and then publishing in academic journals. Different universities will have a different criteria for how many publications you should have every year, what kind of journals, things like that. So if it's a research university, they're going to want more publications than a teaching university, and they may even say it has to be in particular kinds of journals. And then service. So this service means professional service, that's service to your professional community outside of your university. So that's acting as a reviewer for a journal or for conference presentations. Those get peer reviewed. Or at a conference, maybe you have some type of role in the conference to help it to go off smoothly, where you're working in some of the sessions. Then there's university service, so different committees that you're serving on the university to help enhance the university. Then there's service to your college. So that's what are you doing college-wide to help your college achieve its mission to get some of the work done. Department service, so extra things that you're doing to support your department, and then community service. So that's things that you're doing outside of the university in your local community. It can be hosting professional development sessions for teachers. It can be working at a nearby school or a library. It can be a lot of different things, but they're all of your service things. They're unpaid things that you should be doing. So you're not doing them for additional money. You're doing them as acts of service, and they kind of count for your tenure portfolio. And then other would be maybe you're hosting professional development, but you are getting paid for it. You could put that in as like some pragmatic research that you're doing. Or if you're doing professional development where you're learning professional development to make you a better teacher, that might get under your teaching criteria, but it's a little bit of the other. Maybe you're writing lots of letters of recommendation for students. You're doing collaborative work. You're mentoring other students. It depends on the university that you're at, but those other things would go over there. If you're at a research university, you're probably going to have more expectations to mentor students than if like graduate students than if you're at a teaching university. So those are things to think about. So all of your professors have these other criteria besides teaching classes that they're doing. So yes, they're teaching, but they're also doing research. Sometimes that research is to publish. Sometimes they're doing research associated with the county or the state to improve the practices of the county or the state. So it just looks like a lot of different things depending on where you're at. So that can make it really exciting is that you get to kind of dabble in a lot of different things, but it also is a lot of different demands. You have to decide, is that something that you want or that maybe you're realizing this isn't for me. But if somebody does it, I find it really exciting to be able to do lots of things that I'm interested in and passionate about. So as you're thinking about what it is that you want to do, if you're interested in pursuing a PhD or becoming a professor, I hope you've found this helpful, and I wish you the best of luck as you move forward in your educational journey, both